What is going on, everybody? It is Seth with Elite Turf Supply here, back at it again with another install. Today we are going to be walking you through a step-by-step process. We picked this job strategically because most contractors, your first job is going to be anywhere between 400 and 1,000 square feet. We're going to go through all the steps, basing, laying the turf, all that good stuff. Let's get into it. So we have landed our first job here. I am standing on base material. Now, most of the time you're going to have a dig out, some sort of tear out. We got lucky today. It was already dug out. We had some base in here and prepped. So first steps that I'm going to look for when we are prepping for a job, the first thing is window reflections. So if you have any windows that are around your yard that's going to be installed, you want to make sure that they're not casting any harsh reflections onto the grass, because it will melt if the windows are reflecting onto it. It's called turf burn. So once you've assessed that, if there's no windows that are reflecting onto the grass, this home we are clear, so we don't have to put up any window tint. At that point, we are going to start our dig out or tear out. If you can get a dingo in here, skid steer, excavator, any of those things, that will speed up your process. If you don't, or if there's poor access to the yard, most of the time we're just digging out with shovels, picks, and then wheeling it out with wheelbarrows, right? So on most jobs, we're gonna have some sort of dig out or tear out. We wanna dig up at least 4 to 5 inches. Some people have asked me about gas lines, power lines, that kind of thing. Most of those are gonna be buried 18 inches deep below your grade of sod or wherever you're digging out. So if you're worried about it, you can get blue stakes out here, stake them all out, make sure you don't hit them. When we're installing turf, we usually don't run into it that much. Digging out 4 or 5 inches, you're usually safe to dig that out. The other thing that we want to address is sprinklers. Most people have a sprinkler system in their yard. When we're doing turf, I don't like to leave the PVC underneath the turf. So what I usually do is I'm going to cap the sprinklers, or if I can, I'll remove the PVC and add a pop-up by the valve box. That way I don't have any running water. When we remove all the PVC from the grass, if they're doing blowouts or there might be a leak in the pipe, if it leaks, there is a potential that your base will sink. So to ensure that your job is going to stand the test of time, we always remove the sprinklers, cap them, make sure there's no running water, and then that way we can build our base on top of that. Something that's very important when you're coming onto a job is assessing whether or not you're going to need some sort of edging to build your base up against. At this job, we got a little lucky. We have concrete that's poured all the way around this yard, which is ideal for installing turf because it holds the base up really well. Nothing's gonna sink out of it, and our nails will push right up against it. It'll sit nice and tight. If you are installing against a vinyl fence or you're splitting someone's yard to where their neighbor's yard is here and theirs is here, we always want to add some sort of edging, whether it be black metal or composite lumber. Bender board is usually what I recommend. We'll install that, and then that'll give us something solid to bring our turf up. The type of base material that I like to use is something that's like a 3/8 plus or minus. It gives it enough drainage to where nothing's gonna puddle up underneath the turf, but it also compacts really smoothly, so our top layer looks really good. What we're using today is called Crusher Fines. It's a 3/8 plus minus limestone. If you can't get a hold of that, I usually recommend using like a couple inches of 3/4 inch gravel and then like a decomposed granite on top of that. So I usually do 2.5 inches of that and then 1.5 inches of Crusher Fines. The gravel will give us a nice drain basin, with the Crusher Fines giving us a nice smooth layer on top to lay our grass. So if your job is on a slope, usually you want to keep that grade. This job that we're on today is quite flat, so we don't have to worry about that. But if you're in a backyard where someone's yard is sloping towards their house, most of the time I'll try to reverse that and slope it away from their house to make sure that they don't get any flooding issues in their basement. If a yard has a slope to it, it's pretty easy to continue that slope. You'll dig it out and just follow that line with your base. And then if you want to get really technical, maybe get some sort of laser level. And once you set that up on your site, you can double check that everything's flowing away from the house. The way that I normally calculate how much base I'm going to need is depending on the size of stone that I'm using for base material. So today we're using a 3/8 plus or minus stone. So I would take my square footage of the job, I'd multiply it by 0.33, and then I'd divide it by 27. When I round up to the nearest ton, that usually gives me a pretty good gauge on how much I need. The other way you can do it is you just go online, type in rock calculator, square footage, it'll pull up, and then from there you can type in your square footage. If you're using 3/4, 3/8, whatever it might be, 1/4 inch base, type that in and you should get the correct amount of tons for your project. Let's talk about weed barrier for just a second. A lot of people ask me this question, a few different opinions on weed barrier. It is helpful for preventing weeds. However, 80% of my jobs, the client will have a pet, dog, whatever it might be. And when you install weed barrier underneath turf, and if that dog is using the bathroom on the turf all the time, it acts as a carpet catcher and it starts to smell really bad. When we have dogs, we usually don't use weed barrier just to prevent the yard from smelling really bad over time. Now, if you have like a front yard, or if you don't have any pets and you're really concerned about weeds popping up through the turf, then we'll install it for you. We'll put it underneath the base layer, make sure that there's pre-emergent on it, take out all existing roots, put the weed barrier down, and then we'll base on top of that. Okay, so when you're doing your base, sometimes there's some big stones that get mixed in when you're shoveling or when the guy's unloading the rock into your trailer. So if you have any big stones like this that are mixed in with your top layer, you want to get them out, because when you compact them, they're not going to compact nearly as well as this fine stuff will. And then when you step on the grass, you're going to feel it, and you're also probably going to see the bumps throughout the yard. So we just want to get rid of all the big stones that we find when we're doing our final grade. A good way to just move like the top little layer. So instead of using a rake, if you use a broom on the top layer, it'll give you a nice smooth finish. It'll kind of tell you where your grade's sitting at, because sometimes the rake will just move too much and then you'll have to go back over it more, but a broom makes it a little bit easier to just kind of make it smooth and pretty on top. So easily the most important part of any turf install is going to be your base prep. It's where I believe that you should take the most time. If you rush through it and you don't take the time to make sure that your edges are filled in properly, or I mean it's level, you got a bunch of low or high spots, you're going to be left with a subpar install. When you have high spots and low spots, it's going to show through the grass really easily. So if you are not taking your time in your base prep, laying the turf on top of it will expose your install. So what we're doing here is we want to make sure that the edges are pretty much perfect throughout the entire thing. So what we'll do is we will grade to the cement on the edges with our rakes, and then in the middle we will work as a team and grade this out with our rakes, kind of back and forth here. And then at that point, once our base is done, then we'll go to compaction. So the technique that we're using right now to grade is called run rodding, similar to how you would do concrete and make it level. So right here we're gonna have 3 guys with these rakes. Start like this to make sure our edge, so we don't get a dip right here. We're gonna keep our edge, then once we go ahead. I'm gonna go this way. So as you're going, we want to sweep up and clean throughout the whole thing, so that when we lay the turf on, we don't have pebbles that we're going to sweep onto the grass. So we want to eliminate all the dirt first. So all this stuff along the edges, we're going to sweep that off into the base. And then once we're done with that, we're going to wet it down and we're going to run our compactor. One of the most important parts of finishing your base is adding water to your base. So the guy holding the hose, as JW says, is the most important guy on the job site. The reason being is you don't want to soak it too much and then run your compactor right after, because it's going to be really slow, it's going to sink, and then your base is going to stick to the bottom of your compactor. So what we're going to do is we're going to run the hose and we're going to soak it really good, and then we're going to let it sit for like 15 minutes so all the water can go through the base, and then we'll run our compactor after that. If it's too wet or you don't let it sit, like I said, your compactor is going to go over the base, it's going to create these ridges, get stuck to the bottom, and then you're just making more work for yourself. All of our base graded, we have it watered down, we've let it sit for about 15 minutes, kind of let the water soak down in, it'll give us a really solid compaction rate. So the technique that we're going to use first, and we'll give you a lot of tips and tricks throughout this video, and they all have a reasoning because we're trying to ensure that we have the best end result possible. So we're going to run the compactor along the edges first. A lot of people have shovels, so what the compactor does along the edge is it's going to leave a lip of base looking like this, and if you left it like that and then you installed your grass and put nails in, the blades are going to be bent the opposite way, and we want them to be straight up. So behind the compactor, if you don't have a hand tamp, this is what I prefer to use. If you have a shovel, just kind of have it at an angle like this next to the edge, and behind the compactor you just want to tamp it down. So for us, if you don't have one of these, I'd highly recommend grabbing one. So the compactor is going to go along our edge, and I'm going to have one guy like this just tamping down that last little bit to kind of give it a crested look. So when we lay our grass down, our blades are going to be standing straight up and not pointing backwards. A common mistake that I see, or an issue that pops up, if your base is too wet, it'll stick to the bottom of the compactor and it will like leave ridges, which obviously you don't want. In the event that you're leaving ridges, just take a shovel or a trowel or something, and you just want to clean all of that dirt off so that when you run the compactor, you have a smooth layer and you don't have any bumps, ridges going throughout your compaction rate.